On Friday, February 3rd, the renowned Catalyst String Quartet released their third recording in their Uncovered series of recordings. The Uncovered series, as recorded by the Catalysts, hopes to expose the unjustly overlooked music by Black composers to a wider audience and throw some light on who these composers were and their important impact on music. Uncovered Volume 1 dealt with the music of Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Volume 2 dealt with the chamber music of Florence Price. And this third and latest volume deals with the music of three composers, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson, George Walker, and William Grant Still. And joining me here over Zoom, I am super excited to introduce Karla Donehew Perez, who is a violinist with the Catalyst Quartet. Hi, Karla. It's nice to meet you here over Zoom.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
hmm I first want to say the Uncovered series is a project I have been following and listening to with great enthusiasm. I interviewed your cellist, Carlos Rodriguez, about the Samuel Coleridge Taylor CD when it first came out. I also introduced Paul Laraya, the violist, to the quartet when the Florence Price disc came out. And now I'm talking to you about this third volume. And just like the first two volumes, this third volume is again excellent. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, and thanks for your support throughout this series.
hmm And I should also mention that the Uncovered series makes regular appearances on our Classic 107 playlists. So it's nice to have this more music from the Catalyst to program.
Wonderful.
hmm So the third volume deals with three composers, William Grant Still, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson, and George Walker. Was it hard to find their music? And can you talk about some of the challenges that the quartet had while making this recording?
Sure. Um, Finding the music for this volume wasn't as challenging as previous volumes and that we've discussed. I know you've probably discussed with my colleagues that some of the music was in manuscript form, and we had to do a lot of sort of scholarly work to piece things together, a lot of mistakes in parts and whatnot. Um, but this time, there was there was the sort of normal challenge that we have experienced with a lot of this music, where there will be a score but
Right.
no parts, or parts and no score, or with the Walker, he actually worked with colleagues of ours for the first recording that exists, one of only a very tiny number. I think ours is like the second or third. And he made corrections during their recording. And so there's two versions in a
Mhm.
way, different notes, different rhythms. So we decided to go with what our colleagues had done when they worked with him directly.
Mhm. Um, do you know how much chamber music these three composers actually wrote?
Um, yeah, actually, uh, well, all three of them did write a fair amount of chamber music, not a lot of string quartets. Um, so it's just something kind of like what we've been trying to do to shed light on the fact that a lot of these works are just not performed very
Mhm.
much. So unfortunately, they're not very familiar.
Right. I was reading in the notes that I got from Crossover that the music was composed between 1940 and 1956, all three works, all three string quartets. And so for me, I'm thinking, okay, in this period, you've got the Second World War and you've got the stiff Jim Crow laws that were rampant throughout the American South. Do you think that this is two reasons why this music is so overlooked now? I just sort of wonder if this music had been composed in the late 60s, early 70s type thing, if we would know more about these quartets.
Absolutely. I think that that's a big part of it. Obviously, you know, uh, it, with all of the volumes of the Uncovered project, there is a canon that has been set in chamber music in general of what we all are used to hearing. And it's sort of, I always like to use the idea or this example, like if you were to hear a Brahms string quartet performed for the first time by people, like if you heard some people sight reading it even if they were fantastic, amazing players, having never known Brahms' language, right?
Yeah.
It would sound really weird. It would be kind of strange music. There's a sort of familiarity with the language of a lot of these composers that we have because we have had them around for so long. And so
Right.
for these pieces, we've had to kind of like make those traditions, like take the time to find where it comes from for all these people, what they're drawing from, and their own specific language, which is very specific for a lot of the composers.
Hmm. The first quartet on the CD is the Coleridge Taylor Perkinson Cavalry Quartet. Can you talk a little bit about who Coleridge Taylor Perkinson was? What's his background?
Absolutely. He was mainly known as in the jazz world, and also because of his ties to Dance Theater Harlem, and having conducted there and been a part of the start of the Dance Theater Harlem, and he kind of lived in a lot of different worlds musically, which is why I
Mm,
think this piece is so interesting. You'll hear his these rhythms, that are very clearly these jazz rhythms, but then there's also a very soulful spirituals and very classical, like a lot of very like traditional classical language as well. So I just find the whole thing really interesting. It's one of my all-time favorite pieces. I think he was a really fascinating person, worth
mm.
exploring a little more.
Yeah, and I was reading he's named actually for like his mother named him after the English composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor, which I found
Yeah,
just fascinating.
it's
Uh,
wonderful, but people get confused.
yeah. um, the quartet is called Cavalry because it makes use of the African American spiritual cavalry. Can you talk about how Coleridge Taylor Perkinson incorporates it into the quartet? It's in particular in the first and third movements, right?
Yeah, actually, he really uses it all throughout, and he uses the basic rhythm of it and intervals in so many different ways. So you might not think like da da da. It'd be like da 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 da. Like just like these moments, or he loves layering all these kinds of rhythms and everything, and playing with it in really unique ways. Um, it's not always um completely clear, but once you spend time with the piece, you hear it everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a beautiful quartet. The second quartet on the CD is written by what's very often described as the dean of African American composers, William Grant Still. His lyric quartet. It has three movements that are called the sentimental one, the quiet one, and the jovial one. Can you talk about the importance of the titles of those movements?
Yeah, so rumor has it, or people say that it was actually they were modeled after his friends, close friends, and so we were trying in our interpretation to figure out a way to capture that in the best in musically, trying to find that essence of a person. But William Grant Still, uh, I've also read that he did change the title at one point, so it's possible that maybe that wasn't completely the entire inspiration.
Yeah, and again, I was reading in the booklet. There was a snippet that said it musically represents the first movement, a plantation, the second movement, the mountains, and the third movement, a pioneer settlement. And when I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, well, it sort of makes sense. For me, the first two movements, it's sort of like Debussy meets African American spiritual, and yet the third and final movement is sort of this wonderful mixture, actually, of Armenian music. There were some really like it's like Armenian meets hoedown. It's a
Yeah,
really interesting quartet.
yeah, very much so. Uh, yeah, it's very folk like the last movement, and almost like almost too simple, but that's kind of what makes it great.
Hmm. Hmm. The last quartet on the CD is a string quartet written by George Walker, which is coincidentally also called Lyric. It was written in 1946 when he was a student studying at the American School in Fontainebleau, France. It's a great quartet. There's these wonderful dissonant moments, and then there are actually moments that actually reminded me of actually late Beethoven quartets. How was it putting this quartet together? I mean, you touched on it a little bit earlier by talking to your colleagues, but did it create any challenges from an ensemble standpoint, putting it together?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, this piece is fantastic, and a lot. It gets compared to the Barber Quartet a lot because the slow movement has been taken out. I mean, he did publish it separately, just like Barber did. And a lot of people have been playing this movement, especially in the last few years, with the reckoning in the United States, and so it's something that we know now, but we don't know that it belongs to this wonderful quartet, and that actually this beautiful, like extremely tonal, gorgeous lyrical movement exists in the inside of these moments of tension, which I think once you hear the whole piece works really, really well. And it was challenging. I think that the harmonic language, it requires a certain kind of exploration in terms of intonation for the quartet to be able to bring out the colors of the chords in a way that can, complete the musical ideas. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. When I was prepping for this interview, I was watching an interview that you had done. I think it was with a Columbus radio station, and you were saying how one of the things that you'd hope the quartet would do would create usable parts and usable scores of not only this music off the third volume, but also the music of Florence Price that you recorded, as well as the music of Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Is that project happening? Like, is that a thing? And how is that going?
That is something that we're still striving to do. Each of these volumes takes an extremely large amount of fundraising, and we do it all ourselves. We don't pay ourselves to do these things. This is definitely a passion project that we've been trying to do it in a way that it deserves, with great halls and great recording and great engineer and all this stuff, great preparation. So it's something that we're actively fundraising for. It's going to take a lot, and we still have to put out the fourth and final volume of the Uncovered Project, which is all of the quartets by Chevalier de Saint-Georges. So
I mean, it would be nice to have, the score and the parts, just so that this music could get performed more regularly. I mean, the Florence Price stuff is fantastic, as is the stuff off this this third volume. I'm going to wrap the conversation up this way. February is Black History Month, and the CD has just come out. Is the quartet going to be super busy this month, pushing the CD? What does this month of February look like for you?
We've been we're basically not home all of February, and we haven't this month either. I'm actually about to head to El Paso as soon as we're done. I'm on my way to the airport. And we are very fortunate to have a very busy schedule, and luckily we're going to get to play these pieces in a lot of different parts of the country, and hopefully Canada soon.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
It'd be great to have you here. Karla, this has just been wonderful. Uncovered Volume 3 is now currently in our systems, and I'm chomping at the bit to put it to air. Congratulations on this terrific CD, and thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. This has just been a lot of fun.
Thank you.